So good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's a huge honor for me to be here and to speak to you about the experiences in implementing accrual accounting. Obviously, this short presentation can only be a high-level summary of the experiences, but I'm pretty sure that we will have enough time during the next 2 days to talk about that in more detail, and you will certainly hear from other speakers in more detail as well. I think we heard already a couple of very good points, and that makes it easy for me to build on that and not to repeat everything what we have already heard. The organizers of the conference asked me to talk about 4 points, actually. One is the benefits of accrual accounting, and I think we heard a lot about that already. Not only the benefits of accrual accounting, but also the benefits of IPSASB, and I will build on that as well. Secondly, the scope, roadmap, and major players of implementations of accrual accounting, as we see some commonalities around the world when it comes to the implementation process. Talk about major challenges in point number 3 before I come then to the final point, which is the key success factors for successful implementations of accrual accounting as the last part of my short presentation. So with that, let me start with the benefits of accrual accounting. And actually, this is already reflected in the title. And the moderator of this session already kind of took my presentation and in summarizing Ian's presentation already highlighted. But I think let's dig a little bit deeper and kind of look at some examples of countries to make it a little bit more tangible when we talk about benefits of accrual accounting. When it comes to comparability, I think Ian talked already about the benefits of being internationally comparable. But coming from a country like Germany, where we have 33 different accounting frameworks, 16 lenders, 16 states, 16 frameworks for the communities, for the local governments in the states, and 1 accounting framework for the federal state, then you can imagine that there is no comparability at all. And so kind of accrual accounting already provides benefits in being comparable within a country, not only talking about between countries. So obviously comparability is one of the first benefits. When it comes to transparency, obviously, I think we already realized that accrual accounting in general improved transparency, and citizens, and this is often mentioned, will be provided with better information about government's finances. It is important, though, to understand that financial statements in itself are not enough to make citizens understand about a government's performance. If you provide citizens with financial statements of 250 pages, nobody will understand, even if you apply accrual. So this is where kind of storytelling comes into play. And this is where I want to do a marketing announcement for the World Bank Guide to Storytelling, which means translating financial information in understandable messages for citizens in order to understand what it is really about, what you collected in terms of accrual data. We already heard about improved accountability when it comes to oversight of public spending, which is strengthened. And obviously, it is true that with improved data, politicians and senior executives can effectively demonstrate the use of public money and measure performance. And one very good example I learned already years ago to make it a little bit more tangible is New Zealand, the example of New Zealand. You know that New Zealand is already applying accrual accounting since decades. And it was in the year 2011 when there was a big earthquake in New Zealand, in Christchurch. You might remember that. It was shortly before Christmas in December. And obviously the government of New Zealand, directly after the earthquake, provided citizens with the promise to cover the damages of citizens who kind of suffered any losses. If New Zealand would have had cash, the cash outflows based on this promise were only 3 to 4 years later. And the government always said, we are happy that we have accrual accounting because in the balance sheet of 2011, they already were able to recognize a provision based on the promise. And everybody understood why in 2011 there was a deficit in the accounts. If they would have had cash 4 years later, nobody would have made any connection to the cash out flows and to kind of any deficits years later. So accrual accounting is kind of providing you with the opportunity to immediately reflect any incidences which kind of impact the performance of government's finances. Decision-making as the last point, obviously, the more accurate the information is and the more comprehensive information you have, this leads to better decision-making. And another very good example here is UK. UK has an entity which is called the Contingent Liability Management Facility. And it is already very good if you already know about guarantees governments and contingent liabilities government incurred and already report on that. But it's even better if you kind of do the assessment of future impact on financial statements of guarantees you want to provide and of liabilities you want to incur before you sign the contract. And this is what UK is already doing. They are kind of assessing every draft contract and every draft arrangement before they enter into it. What will be the impact on our future financial statements? And then they base the decision on that before they sign the contract. Another example is Saudi Arabia. You may have heard that Saudi Arabia is undergoing a whole country reform, which is called Vision 2030. This Vision 2030 has 12 pillars, including education, including health sector. But one pillar, and that's the foundational pillar, is the reform of public finance management as the foundational precondition to undergo other reforms. So what they do first is do a stock taking about the assets in the health sector, stock taking about the assets in education, before they build the decisions on future reforms in these sectors and improve the service provision in these sectors. So in summary, obviously an updated accounting and reporting system can provide both government and their citizens with better information on public sector performance. But when it comes to implementation, it is important to understand that an implementation of accrual accounting is not a pure technical accounting exercise. When it comes to the scope and the content, you see that it impacts 3 dimensions of government's operations, which is process, which is technology, and which is the organization of the whole government. And this is what the moderator already said in the introduction. It's not a project of the accounting department in its own. When it comes to the accounting itself, obviously the extent of information provided about assets and liabilities, about revenue and expenses is changed. This is the changes in presentation. You have new valuation rules, so you kind of have different measurement bases and new measurement bases which you apply. And obviously you have comprehensive additional information to be disclosed, which is the disclosure requirements, which kind of ask the question, where do we get the data from? So it is important to understand that IPSAS implementation or accrual implementation impacts all levels of accounting in the government. It impacts several areas outside of the accounting function, and a top-level conversion will not be sufficient. What is a top-level conversion? There is one example with an Arabic country, which already years ago started with a reform, but they made the mistake to say, okay, we do like a high-level conversion and stay on cash during the year and only convert into accrual financial statements at the end of the year. They realized that this is not bringing the benefits, right? So you have to change the system and not only the statement at the year end. So how to get there? And I think we heard about that as well already. There is not a single truth when it comes to how to get from pure cash to pure accrual and IPSAS-based accrual in the end. You see that there is the opportunity to come from a non-IPSAS compliant cash basis, which is on the top left. go versus the cash basis standard of IPSAS, and then move down to accrual compliant IPSAS. That's one way. I think this is the way Cambodia is going, as much as I understood. But there are other ways already. You go from a non-IPSAS compliant cash basis, you apply national accrual, and then from national accrual, you move to the right to accrual-based IPSAS. Again, there is no single truth. There are different choices between a big bang approach or a stage approach, like Cambodia is doing. So again, there is no single truth when it comes to the way. It really depends on the circumstances of the country, and every country has to make its own choice. But whatever way you decide, the major steps is always the same. So you see, you start with a sensitivity basis, meaning you kind of bring the politicians on your side. You explain the benefits, why are we doing that? You do the gap analysis, you prepare the legal foundation, do capacity building and IT processes before it comes to the first time adoption and the opening balance sheet, get audit readiness and consolidation. So
just wrap up one more minute.
This is challenging. Okay, so in one more minute, I can only say there are many players, as you see, and all the players have to play a role. And when it comes to the challenges, obviously, and we can talk about that more during the breaks, you see a lot of challenges. Certainly, the political support is the major challenge at the beginning. But when it comes to practical conduction of the implementation, registration and measurement of assets and liabilities, and preparation of the opening balance sheet is a major challenge as well. And that brings me to my last slide, Mr. Moderator, which is the key success factors. But let me allow to spend 1 minute here, because it is 6 points which I want to highlight here, which are really important. And the first point is, do not rush into a project in order to show quick results or quick successes. It is really important to take your time to develop solid strategy, to decide on the scope. Is a budget reform included, or is it only accrual reform? Anticipate challenges, focus on core entities, decide which are the core entities in the government. Don't include every single small entity. Decide on where are the major assets, where are the major entities, the major liabilities, and focus on that. Plan dry runs, design a training concept, and consider how to link the reform to the decision-making process. And this is actually where it comes to the legal foundation as well. Include accrual accounting in the decision-making based on law. Second success factor is communication. Get the media on your side, explain the benefits, and constantly report success stories, because that is very important. Assess the conversion readiness of IT systems at an early point. This is really the major project risk, because it limits deviations, or you have to limit deviations from the standard to rare cases with the sound rationale. This is where projects can really fail. Involve all players from the start, especially Parliament and auditors, because auditors play a major role here, as you might already experience in your country. Establish conversion project steering committee to include all parts of governments, because it is important to have that as a holistic approach. Ensure all players are moving at the same pace, because the slowest part is really defining the time to full success when it comes to get all players to the final target. And last but not least, develop a realistic roadmap and a realistic timetable, because aggressive deadlines and missing them in the end really deteriorates credibility and trust, and that is not helping in the end. So with that, I'm coming to the end. Thank you very much, and really looking forward to other presentations, making my points probably, which I have not been able to make. Thank you.